Most economic shocks announce themselves with crashing markets or sudden conflicts, but a much larger macro shift is currently happening in silence. In 2007, U.S. hospitals recorded over 4.3 million births. Last year, despite a larger total population, that dropped to roughly 3.6 million. This chart tracks the global replacement level. That horizontal line sits at 2.1 births per woman, the mathematical threshold required to keep a population stable without relying on outside immigration. Over 70% of the global population now lives in countries that have dropped below that line. The European Union averages 1.34. South Korea has dropped to 0.7. Across almost every developed economy, the numbers are trending down. This is a structural shift that conflicts with a core assumption in modern economics: the assumption that there will always be a growing supply of new people to produce and consume goods. For 50 years, global prosperity relied on massive surplus of young people entering the workforce. This demographic dividend provided the cheap, energetic labor that powered industrial expansion across the globe. You can see the physical results of that surplus in the massive growth of China. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, rapid population growth provided the human capital needed to build these skylines and sustain aggressive industrialization. The peak of this global dividend has passed. The generations that built that infrastructure are aging out of the workforce, and there aren't enough young people behind them to maintain the same momentum. We're moving from a world with an oversupply of human labor to one defined by scarcity. The macro environment has flipped. Instead of too many people competing for capital, we now have too much capital chasing too few workers. The drivers of this decline are largely economic. In hyper-urbanized centers, the cost of housing, education, and childcare has surged. For young adults living in these environments, the financial trade-off for raising a large family has become too high. This creates a great labor squeeze. For decades, if an employee didn't like their wage, there were people waiting in line to take their place. Today, that pool of workers is evaporating, turning human labor into a scarce premium asset. The bargaining power has shifted. While individual workers hold more leverage, essential physical industries like healthcare and construction are facing structural, unfillable shortages. If you are running a warehouse and you can no longer find a 22-year-old to work the night shift, your model for scaling a business hits a wall. Capital has to find a different way to grow. The immediate response from massive tech and industrial firms is a surge in capital expenditure. They are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into automation. If a human hand isn't available, they have to build a robotic one to keep the machines moving. Investors are now hunting for labor-saving alpha. The market is moving away from the old model of growth at any cost and instead rewarding companies that can prove their technology replaces a hard-to-fill human role. This also triggers a shift in where money physically moves. Investment capital is beginning to leave aging, low-fertility nations to seek out regions that still have a demographic tailwind. Those targets are primarily sub-Saharan Africa and parts of South Asia. By 2100, 1 in every 2 children born on Earth will be in sub-Saharan Africa. Institutional investors are already laying groundwork there, recognizing these regions as the last sources of future labor and consumer demand. Global wealth is shifting in response to these numbers. It is flowing toward the final frontiers of youth and the technologies designed to replace them everywhere else. To see how this affects the state, look at the population pyramid. This chart visualizes the dependency ratio. Modern social safety nets and pension systems require this structure, a wide base of young workers generating the taxes needed to support a tiny peak of retirees at the top. But as fertility rates drop and life expectancy rises, the pyramid inverts. In several advanced economies, the ratio of active taxpayers to retirees is dropping toward a margin of just 2 to 1. The resulting fiscal pressure is staggering. An aging population requires more healthcare and assisted living resources, just as the taxpayer pool begins to shrink. Governments are caught in a trap. To bridge the gap, they either raise taxes on the remaining workers or reduce benefits for seniors. Both of these options trigger immediate political instability. A state cannot physically birth or borrow its way out of an inverted demographic structure. At the human level, this creates a squeezed middle generation. Today's workers are simultaneously burdened with caring for aging parents, affording their own children, and paying the taxes required to keep a straining state afloat. The big question hanging over the global economy is whether the trillions invested in automation can bridge this productivity gap in time. We are looking at two possible futures. If the technology scales, we might see a transition powered by advanced robotics. If it falls short, we face a prolonged era of economic stagnation, where a lack of human consumers drags down growth. The century-long pursuit of managing infinite humans is over. Prosperity no longer depends on an endless supply of labor, but on maximizing the innovation and efficiency of a finite few.